Thank you. We'll now move to question time. Senator Scarr.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, following the recent High Court decision, how many of the 84 detainees, including pedophiles, rapists, murderers and a contract killer, so far released into the community, does the government intend to force to wear ankle monitoring or tracking devices?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, and I appreciate the courtesy of the way in which the senator addressed me, and Senator Watt says the senator's taking over.
Do you have letterhead like Richard Marsden? Because he says acting Prime Minister. That's a media release. That's a media release.
Order, Senator Wong.
Were you Berno?
Oh, it's Friday, isn't it? Senator, can I just make this point? We all know that the High Court decision that is at the heart of that question overturned a 20-year precedent. We all know that the Commonwealth Government, the Albanese Government's submissions were against the decision. We all know that this bill there was a bill that came to the Senate, to the Parliament appropriately. We know that both parties of government agreed it was urgent, agreed we were willing to work together.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Scarr.
President, direct relevance. The question specifically goes to what tracking and monitoring security factors have been adopted in relation to this cohort of serious criminal offenders. To how many detainees are subject to those monitoring requirements? It doesn't need a preamble in relation to history.
Thank you, Senator Scarr. It also went to the High Court decision, but I'll remind. Thank you.
We agreed pragmatically to work with you, both parties of government, to resolve this, to act in the national interest, and every one of your amendments was agreed. So what I'd say to the opposition is, don't continue to just try and make conflict with this. Don't continue to just focus on division, because what we saw yesterday was a pragmatic agreement to operate in the national interest. What I would say is the advice I have in relation to the electronic monitoring is the condition will be mandatorily imposed on all bridging visa holders in the NZYQ affected cohort. That's obviously a decision for the minister. The condition may be lifted only if the minister determines that the individual poses no community safety risk.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scarr, first supplement.
Thank you, President. I should say my intention is not to provide for conflict, but to ask questions relating to the safety of the Australian community. In a similar tone, Acting Prime Minister, could you say how many of the 84 detainees does the government intend to impose a curfew upon?
Minister Wong.
I am also advised that the curfew condition will be mandatorily imposed on all bridging visa holders in the NZYQ affected cohort. The condition may only be lifted if the minister determines the individual poses no community safety risk. The duration of the curfew is limited to a maximum continuous period of 8 hours, with the default hour set at 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. each day. The curfew limits the ability of the visa holder to depart the place at which they are ordinarily required to be during curfew hours, which would ordinarily be the person's residential address. And I'll just respond to the suggestion that the comments that Senator Scarr made. We're all focused on the safety of the Australian people and the safety of the Australian community. We are all focused on it, and it ought not be an issue for political division.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scarr, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, when will these measures to protect the safety of the Australian community from pedophiles, rapists, murderers and a contract killer actually be implemented?
Minister.
Well, I'd refer to my previous answers, which went to the mandatory electronic monitoring and the mandatory curfew. If the question is about the royal assent, I will check where the passage of the bill is.
Thank you. Senator Green.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, Senator Watt. I refer to the Albanese Labor government's commitment to end the Liberal and Nationals' legacy of rorts and waste and deliver the infrastructure that Australia needs. How does the government's response to the infrastructure review deliver for my home state of Queensland?
Minister Watt. Order. Order. Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. I don't know why it is that at the mere mention of the words rorts and waste we hear a lot of noise coming from the National Party. Is it there's this Pavlovian response from the National Party every time we hear about rorts and waste? Well, Senator Green, thank you very much for your question, because it does give me an opportunity to highlight how the Albanese government is delivering for infrastructure in Queensland. And of course, yesterday the Albanese government announced our response to the independent review of the Infrastructure Investment Program. And that review was a shameful indictment on the Liberals and Nationals that found $33 billion in cost blowouts, which would have stopped any new infrastructure projects until 2033, not to mention driving inflation up. Our response to the review will reform the federal government's investment to deliver an infrastructure program that is funded and can actually be delivered, including in Queensland. And there is plenty of good news for Queensland in yesterday's announcement. All up, over $2 billion in extra funding for Queensland infrastructure, including, have a listen to the list, an extra $1.7 billion towards the Logan and Gold Coast faster rail upgrade, an extra $70 million for the M1 Pacific motorway, an extra $27 million for the Centenary Bridge upgrade, an extra $46 million for the Boundary Road Level Crossing project, an extra $8.9 million for the Bribie Island Road project, an extra $3 million for the Beenleigh Road connection.
Minister Watt.
And we're also contributing—
Minister Watt, please issue. Senator McGrath.
I'm reluctant to do this, but a point of order and relevance. He hasn't mentioned Emu Swamp Dam.
Thank you, Senator McGrath. That is a debating point, Minister.
And we're also contributing additional funding towards Chambers Flat Road in Park Ridge, Charters Towers Industrial Precinct access, Logan Lee Road upgrades, Shute Harbour Road upgrades and road extensions in Harvey Bay. And of course, where the Liberals and Nationals failed to properly fund and even start construction on the Rockhampton Ring Road, we are actually getting on with it, delivering it and funding it, with early works having started, allocating an additional $347 million towards Rocky. You're welcome, Senator Canavan. We're happy to do what you couldn't do any day of the week.
Thank you, Minister. Order. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister.
Order.
It is clear that the Albanese Labor government is focused on delivering for communities right across Queensland, while the Liberals and Nationals were only interested in press releases and colour-coded spreadsheets. How does the government's response to the infrastructure review also deliver for New South Wales?
I'm not going to call the minister. Senator Hughes. Senator Hughes, I've called you a number of times this question time. You are being disrespectful. Minister Watt.
Another very good question, Senator Green. And again, I don't know what it is about colour-coded spreadsheets that sets the National Party off. Is there something you're ashamed of there? New South Wales is an example of how bad it can get when the coalition is in power, both federally and at a state level. Instead of nation-building infrastructure, you get car parks that can't be delivered. And in the case of the Great Western Highway, instead of coordinated and strategic infrastructure investment, we experienced the Morrison government funding two ends of a road project on the condition that the state government funded a tunnel in the middle. The only problem was there was no money for the tunnel. So the Morrison government had two ends of a road with nothing in between. Now, we know Rob Sitch was here the other night for the ABC special, but even he would have been surprised to find a far-fetched proposal like that for an episode of Utopia. That is how the Morrison government ran. That is how the Joyce leadership of the National Party ran. We are cleaning up the waste. We are delivering extra funding for New South Wales. We are delivering more infrastructure. We're going to do what you never actually managed to get around to.
Senator Green, second supplementary.
Oh, thank you, President. How does the government's response to the infrastructure review address the inflationary pressures that the Liberals and the Nationals ignored?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, as we know from the infrastructure review, the economic mismanagement we saw around infrastructure from the Liberals and Nationals was astounding. They oversaw cost blowout after cost blowout and failed to act. And our response to the review provides a forward plan of projects that are properly planned, properly targeted, properly funded. They will actually happen. And that means investment that will grow the economy, improve productivity and take pressure off inflation. Now, earlier in the week, I pointed out the disagreement that seems to exist between the Liberals and the Nationals about whether we should spend more money or less. We've had Senator Bragg and Senator Hume out there and others saying we need a contractionary budget, spend less, while we have Senator McKenzie saying spend men, spend more. But what I've actually learned is that even Senator McKenzie herself can't agree with herself about her position on this, because at the same time that she's been out there calling for more infrastructure funding, just this week she's actually called on the government to rein in our actual spending. What do you want us to cut? What do you want? Do you want more spending or less?
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, you have twice this week claimed that even though inflation peaked at a lower level in Australia than other advanced economies, it makes sense for inflation to now be higher than in those countries. You also repeatedly cite international factors as the driver of Australia's inflation rate, yet core inflation is now higher in Australia than in 6 of the G7 economies. Minister, do you have any idea how nonsensical your explanations are sounding? Do you even understand how inflation works, as Senator Watt just proved he didn't?
Minister Gallagher.
Well, the answer to that is yes. You might not like my answer, but well, no. The last part of the question was, do I understand it? The answer, the last part of the question, in relation to the inflation challenge, I accept that you don't like the answer I give, or that you're trying to pretend that there aren't global factors that are leading to the inflation challenge in the Australian economy. But whether it has been the cuts to oil production, the war in Ukraine, events in the Middle East, there are no doubt that those global factors are weighing on the Australian economy. And I have made that clear. And when you go and look through the data, you'll see. Well, I mean, again, I know you don't like the answer here, but it is peaked in Australia as well, and is coming down. It is not coming down as fast as we would like, that's for sure. And I think we've been saying that for some time now. But the job of the government in dealing with the inflation challenge has been to ensure that we can provide cost of living relief without adding to it, to get the budget in much better shape, which we have done, which I also acknowledge that you don't like. We've delivered the first surplus in 15 years. We've returned upward revisions to revenue to the budget to get the budget in much better shape. We've found $40 billion worth of savings that you never found, were incapable of finding, and indeed when you went looking for savings, let's remember who you pursued. You pursued, through robo-debt, $4 billion worth of savings to the budget bottom line that turned out to be Australian citizens on income support, who you then hounded and threatened with jail. That is the way you ran the budget. Let us not forget that.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Hughes, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Treasury Secretary has acknowledged that Labor's policy to increase immigration by 715,000 people over 2 years is putting increased pressure into housing and rental markets. Minister, is the rate of immigration and population growth adding to inflation?
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Minister Gallagher.
I don't accept that that is what the Treasury Secretary has said, and I think it's thoroughly unsurprising, Senator Hughes, that you would come in here and verbal the Treasury Secretary, as you choose to verbal a whole range of people, not you individually, but the opposition as a whole. So I don't accept that. And I also don't—
Minister, please resume your seat.
Well, find me the bit where he blamed—
Order. Order. Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Hughes, I'll remind you to wait for the call, and I'll remind all senators that interjections across the chamber are disorderly. Senator Hughes.
President, perhaps you could remind the minister to direct her comments through you and not make imputations to senators by using you while pointing at them in a specific way.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Senator, order. Order. I am more than willing. Senator Hughes, would you like to hear the response? I am more than willing to remind senators to address their answers to the chair, and I will once again take this opportunity to remind senators that interjections are disorderly. Minister Gallagher, please continue.
Thank you very much. I do challenge the way that Senator Hughes has framed that question. In terms of the increases in net overseas migration that we've been seeing, and I've answered a question earlier in the week on this in relation to the fact there hasn't been any changes in policy settings. What we have seen is an increase in the number of—
sorry, Senator Birmingham. Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
Point of order on direct relevance. The question wasn't about whether there were policy changes to net overseas migration settings. The question was about whether that rate of immigration and population growth is adding to inflation. And the Finance Minister and the Treasurer actually addressed the connection and the impact on inflation.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. The question also went to comments the Treasury Secretary had made. They went to immigration, they went to housing, they went to rents, and they went to inflation. And the minister is being relevant. Minister, please continue.
And in relation to the pressures on the housing market, they've been a result of a decade of neglect by you. That's the result, and that's what we've seen. And so, and you voted against our policies that seek to address it.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham.
A further point of order, President, to seek you to bring the minister to the question, and also, President, to ask you when this chamber comes back to bring to the chamber a sense of ruling and guidelines as to how questions can be structured such that they may actually have a test of direct relevance in force. Because the ruling you just made before essentially means that if any word is contained in a question, then you are going to deem that to be directly relevant if the minister somehow hangs off of that word, in which case it makes no difference as to how a question is worded, how specific a question it can be. It is just, President, the fact that you are allowing a word association game to take place. She hasn't given you the call yet, Senator Wong. So you don't just get to stand and speak. She's the President. She can sit me down and then give you the call. You don't get to.
Senator Birmingham, I've taken your point of order. If you'll order. I'll just respond to Senator Birmingham. Thank you, Senator Wong.
I'm seeking the call. And you also, through you, the Leader of the Opposition also doesn't get to dictate how this chamber runs. I was seeking the call. I was seeking the call. Are you finished?
You didn't wait for me to finish.
I'm very happy for Senator Birmingham to have a look at how much time he just took with a point of order. But on the point of order, it has never been the case. It has never been the case that the opposition or the chamber can dictate to the president precisely how they rule on points of order relating to direct relevance. And I would make this point. That the most we on this side got over there was precisely what this president is doing, which is to draw a minister to the question, consistent with what President Ryan did. Now, I know you'd like a different ruling than the ones that have been in place for some long time, for a very long period of time, but I'd submit to you, President, you ought not be required to come back with the sort of document that he requests, because you are entirely consistent with the rulings of past presidents.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Birmingham, I will say I think you quoted me out of context. I simply referred to statements made by the Treasury Secretary. I did not go to some kind of single-word analysis. As you are well aware, a minister, in responding to a question, is able to respond to the entirety of the question, and the minister is also entitled to respond to interjections. I have tried very hard, as I do every single question time, to ask for silence in this chamber. I very rarely get it. If senators want their questions answered, then I would suggest no interjections and where necessary I will draw the minister back to the question, as I do and have done this week. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And I would just point out that the steps we've taken to address pressures in the housing market have been opposed by those opposite.
Senator Hughes, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. There's lots of words in this question, so we'll see how we go if we get an answer. When the second Albanese budget was handed down, economists criticised it as being an expansionary budget that would keep inflation higher for longer. For months, Labor denied its budget would keep inflation higher for longer. Yet now, the Treasurer and Finance Minister repeatedly state that inflation is staying higher for longer. Weren't the experts right in their critique of your budget, while the Albanese government clearly botched its budget?
Senator Hughes, the time for answering has expired. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, no, I reject that, and I also reject the assertions that there was as implied by Senator Hughes, that there was this unanimous view by economists, which is absolutely incorrect.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Wong.
Called Senator Hughes a number of times. No, I'm not. I'm making a point of order, Chair. Thank you. Point of order, Chair. You've called Senator Hughes a number of times. I'd ask you to call her so the minister can complete her answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Hughes, I did call you. I expect you to respect that call and to cease your interjections. Minister Gallagher, please continue.
And I would say, and I used this quote yesterday about the view of the International Monetary Fund, which actually, if we listen to what they have said, called our fiscal policies prudent, a fiscal stance supportive of reducing inflation, and that our budget strategy has seen Australia move up the global league table for fiscal management. Again, from the IMF, Australia is expected to have the fourth strongest budget balance as a share of GDP amongst G20 countries, up from 15th in 2021. So let's have a listen to that, not listen to the incorrect assertions by Senator Hughes. We have been very cautious around our fiscal stance to ensure that it doesn't add to the inflation challenge.
Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Education.
Senator Faruqi, I'm sorry. Senator Hughes, I called you to order and you've continued to interject. I now have called Senator Faruqi to— Senator Hughes, do not argue with me. You're not in a debate with me. I am calling you to order. You are out of order. Senator Faruqi, please start your question from the beginning.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Education. News reports today say that Minister Clare is considering the idea of a national student ombudsman to protect students from physical or sexual assaults on campus or in university accommodation. Minister, sexual violence on campuses is widespread and systemic. Hundreds of students are sexually assaulted every single week. Every student has the right to be safe at uni. But it's clear universities have failed to protect students, and the government must step in. Tireless campaigning from advocates including EROC, Fair Agenda and the Stop campaign has brought the government to the table to finally act. Minister, can you confirm that the government—
Order. Order, Senator McKenzie. You've been called to order. Senator Faruqi, please continue.
Thank you, President. Minister, can you confirm that the government will set up a National Student Safety Ombudsman with real teeth, which is independent, transparent and has expert-led oversight of universities?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Faruqi, and I am in agreement with you that there is a very serious problem when it comes to sexual violence on Australian university campuses, and this is something that the Albanese government takes very seriously. The 2021 National Student Safety Survey found that 16.1% of students had been sexually harassed and 4.5% of students had been sexually assaulted during their time at university. And as I'm sure you're aware, Senator Faruqi, last month the NTEU's sexual harassment survey report showed 29% of respondents said that they had a personal experience of sexual harassment, while 50% were also aware of others who have been sexually harassed. Those figures are simply not good enough. The Universities Accord interim report, released earlier this year, made 5 recommendations, and one of these is the need to improve university governance with a focus on ensuring student and staff safety on campus. As you'd be aware, Senator Faruqi, the Minister for Education, Mr Clare, has established a working group with representatives from each state and territory, and he's also appointed Ms Paddy Kinnersley to this working group. Ms Kinnersley is the CEO of Our Watch, a national leader in the primary prevention of violence against women and children in Australia. The Minister has told the Parliament before that it's time to act and that universities have not done enough. He's met with representatives from the Stop campaign, End Rape on Campus and Fair Agenda, and amongst many things they raised issues on residential colleges, lack of information on how to make a complaint and no formal feedback following a complaint. Turning to the issues around the Ombudsman, the working group is expected to deliver draft recommendations to Education Ministers next week. The Minister has already said they are considering a number of actions, including the establishment of a National Student Ombudsman. The Minister has also said that the status quo is not good enough and that this government is serious about making a difference on this very important issue.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Minister Faruqi.
Thank you.
Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. Minister, students are suffering from violence on campus right now. So action cannot wait any longer. When will the government set up an independent body or a National Student Safety Ombudsman to hold universities accountable for failing to keep students safe?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Watt.
Well, Senator Faruqi, as I said, the working group that Minister Clare established is due to report back to and provide draft recommendations to education ministers next week, and they are expected to include the establishment of a National Student Ombudsman. Education ministers have been briefed by the chair of the working group on early considerations for ensuring student and staff safety, and one of those emerging recommendations, which we'll have to wait and see what the report says, is a new National Student Ombudsman. Any such new body would need to have teeth to meet the needs and expectations of students across Australia. The full scope of draft recommendations is being finalised by the working group and will be provided to education ministers for consideration. I give Minister Clare credit for taking on this issue. It's something that has needed to be done for quite some time, and let's hope that this Ombudsman gets up and running soon and can actually start making a difference on university campuses.
Senator Faruqi, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister TEQSA, the higher education regulator, has been totally missing in action on student safety. Shamefully, TEQSA has failed to even investigate complaints of sexual violence, and in estimates we learned that they've totally canned their reworking of a good practice note on addressing sexual violence in higher education. Minister, will the government commit to an independent inquiry into TEQSA to ensure the failures of TEQSA are never repeated again?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. And you're right, there have been issues regarding the performance of TEQSA that have been raised at Senate estimates committees. And again, Senator Faruqi, as you would be aware, the government is already undertaking a review of the higher education sector through the Universities Accord process. And one of the things being considered through that process is TEQSA's role. I would expect then that the issues that you're raising are exactly the types of things that are being considered as part of that Universities Accord process, in addition to other issues that have arisen in relation to TEQSA. The final report from the Accord panel will be provided to government by the end of this year. We'll, of course, consider those recommendations, and should they have anything to say about TEQSA, I'm sure that Minister Clare will be taking the appropriate action.
Senator Bilyk.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Health workers are the backbone of our health system. For people confronted with a cancer diagnosis, navigating their cancer treatment journey can be overwhelming. Cancer nurses provide invaluable support to patients who are confronting some of their toughest days. Could the Minister please update the Senate on the landmark funding announced today to deliver more cancer nurses and additional cancer care for patients?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Bilyk for the question. I can confirm that today the Albanese government has announced the biggest investment in cancer nurses on record, and I know this is a matter close to your heart, Senator Bilyk, and the attention that you have placed on health services and cancer services through your work through the Senate. Today's announcement builds on the government's combined investment of over $500 million to establish the National Lung Cancer Screening Program and improving cancer outcomes for First Nations people with cancer announced earlier this year. With the recent release of the Australian Cancer Plan developed by the Cancer Australia and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Cancer Plan developed by the National Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation, it's timely that the government is announcing this funding today. For people who are confronted with a cancer diagnosis, navigating their cancer treatment journey can be overwhelming. That's why we're investing in additional support for patients during this time. The government is committing $166 million for a first-of-its-kind Australian cancer nursing and navigation program. The program will improve cancer outcomes across Australia, from cancer prevention and early detection through to recovery, treatment, survivorship and end-of-life care. It will ensure people have access to the resources and support they need to better navigate their cancer journey. I'm proud that this government is building on the McGrath Foundation's well-established cancer nursing model to recruit 100 new cancer care nurses in health and hospital services across the country who will support all people with cancer, regardless of their cancer type. We have asked the McGrath Foundation to lead the Cancer Care Nurse program in partnership with the cancer sector, including organisations like the Lung Foundation Australia, Melanoma Institute of Australia and Rare Cancers Australia.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bilyk, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. I'm pleased to learn of the government's commitment to high-quality, multidisciplinary and integrated cancer services for all people with cancer. Can the minister provide more details on the Cancer Navigation Service announced today and other programs that will support cancer patients through their diagnosis and treatment and beyond?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Bilyk for the supplementary. We want to ensure that everyone with cancer gets the care that they need when and where they need it, whether that be lung cancer or a rare cancer. We also recognise the depth of experience in the cancer sector has in delivering specialised support to their patients. This is why we'll also be funding these organisations to deliver specialised telehealth support to patients across the country, integrating care with their cancer care nurse in hospital. This funding will also see the Cancer Council of Australia connecting people with cancer to information and support relevant to their needs through a new cancer navigation service. And it will see Canteen, in collaboration with Camp Quality and Red Kite, continue the very successful Child and Youth Cancer Hub and Canteen Connect programs, which are vital to young Australians experiencing cancer and the individual needs that they have.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bilyk, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for that answer too. It's really positive news. Can the minister please further outline how these investments are complementing the significant investments already made in the Albanese government's first two budgets to improve cancer outcomes across Australia, from cancer prevention and early detection through to recovery, treatment, survivorship and end-of-life care?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Bilyk for that supplementary. The government is making this record investment in our trusted nursing workforce and the broader cancer sector so that they can get on with the job of providing comprehensive care to people with cancer now and into the future. We have also announced today that the Albanese government is investing our $48.2 million to support implementation of the National Strategy for the Elimination of Cervical Cancer in Australia. These investments build on the government's other significant investments through the 23-24 budget to establish the National Lung Cancer Screening Program, supporting Aboriginal and community-controlled health organisations sector to support cancer care needs of First Nations people on the ground, and ensure mainstream cancer care services are culturally safe and accessible to First Nations people. These measures take the Commonwealth's investment in improving cancer outcomes to almost $2.5 billion over the next 4 years, excluding the cost of Medicare services and
pharmaceuticals.
Minister.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Senator Watt. Minister, why is the Australian government no longer proceeding with construction of the Emu Swamp Dam and Pipeline located near Stanthorpe in our state of Queensland?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. And I welcome a question about Queensland infrastructure from a Queensland senator on the other side of the chamber. It's a shame people like Senator McGrath didn't manage to get a question up about these important issues themselves. Senator McGrath, of course, has just reduced to interjections rather than actually asking serious questions about these matters. You don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear about your failures on infrastructure. If you've heard what I've had to say this week, Senator Roberts, what you'll know is that the infrastructure budget that we inherited from the coalition was hopelessly overblown. Budget blowouts of $33 billion.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
President, a point of order, and this is actually a good example of the type of point of order I made before. Senator Roberts asked a question about a particular infrastructure project, the Emu Swamp Dam. That is not then, or should not be then, licence for the minister to go off talking about infrastructure projects in general, or the former government in general. It was clearly a question specific to a particular project, and the minister should be drawn to answer on that project.
Minister Wong.
I can recall many times when coalition, on the point of order, President, I can recall many times when coalition ministers went much further than 41 seconds in before they even get close to the question. I'd remind you of Senator Brandis. We all remember that. Senator Brandis when sitting in this chair. So, yeah.
You sitting in this chair, what we had to say.
Yeah, and I never got very far with that argument. But you know, hope beats eternal.
Senator Rennick. Senator Rennick.
Poor old Jared. You're not going to be here long.
Minister Wong.
Enjoy it while you're here, Jared.
Order. Senator Henderson. Minister Wong, please resume. Senator Henderson, order across the chamber. Order. Senator Henderson, I ask you to withdraw that remark.
Can I take a point of order?
I've asked you to withdraw the remark.
Point
Senator
of order,
Henderson.
President.
Senator Henderson, I've asked you to withdraw the remark.
I withdraw, but can I take a point of order?
If you sit down, I will then entertain a point of order, as long as it's not on me asking you to withdraw. Thank you. Senator Henderson.
A point of order. President, Senator Watt just made a very uncalled for and offensive remark in relation to Senator Rennick, and I would ask him to withdraw it.
Senator, order. Senator Henderson, I didn't hear any remark. The chamber was incredibly disorderly at the time. So all I can do is ask Senator Watt if he made a personal reflection upon Senator Rennick to withdraw that. Senator Watt.
I'm happy to withdraw. Senator Rennick has a lot to say.
Senator
I'm happy to withdraw.
Watt, before I call you again, I will draw your attention back to Senator Roberts' question.
So, Senator Roberts, as I was explaining, the basis for the decisions, the particular project that you're talking about that won't be proceeding is a road to a dam that is not proceeding. This government thinks that it's a good idea if you're spending infrastructure money on a road, it should be a road that leads to something that is actually happening and exists. That dam was a promise that was made by the former coalition government that never had the funding for it, that wasn't properly planned, that is not proceeding. And Senator Roberts, I know you're someone who cares very much about the appropriate use of taxpayers' funds, and you would agree, I'm sure, that it's not a good use of taxpayers' funds to build roads that lead to dams that don't exist and won't exist. But, Senator Roberts, I'm sure you'd also be pleased to have heard me talk about some of the projects in Queensland that are getting funding and that are only possible because of those sorts of decisions about responsible allocations of funding. So, because of that, what we can now do is fund the cost increase in the Rockhampton Ring Road project with an extra $348 million in addition to the money that the federal government had created. I know Central Queensland is an area that you're interested in, Senator Roberts. By cutting projects that won't exist, that aren't needed,
you,
we can fund other things like that.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Your government cancelled the Emu Swamp Dam. This water infrastructure would have created 700 jobs, 250 jobs during construction. Your government's decision has axed these jobs. Gone. Minister, why is the Albanese government hollowing out the bush?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Well, Senator Roberts, I have to reject the premise of your question. I think far from the Albanese government hollowing out the bush, especially when we're talking about infrastructure projects, the very announcements we made yesterday not only guaranteed funding for dozens of regional and rural infrastructure projects, but in many cases they actually increased the funding for those projects. Now, we have the opposition saying that there are cuts. I fail to grasp how giving the Rockhampton Ring Road $348 million more money is a cut. To me, that seems like more money rather than less.
Please resume your seat, Senator Roberts.
Matter of relevance. I'm not talking about the Rockhampton Ring Road. I'm talking about the Emu Swamp Dam.
And the minister referred to that part of your question when he first got to his feet. Minister Watt, please continue.
It is the case, Senator Roberts, that there are some projects, some in the cities, some in the bush, that we have decided cannot proceed because there is no funding for them, there is no business case for them, or their costs have blown out so much that they are simply unaffordable. But at the same time, by making those sorts of decisions, we can fund things like the Rockhampton Ring Road, we can fund things like the Charters Towers industrial precinct access, we can fund things like the Shute Harbour road upgrades. So there are many things in regional Australia that we are funding.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts.
During the recent drought, Stanthorpe.
Senator Roberts, just wait, please. I think this is your second supplementary.
Yes.
Thank you.
During the recent drought, Stanthorpe had to resort to water tankers to keep the residents supplied with drinking water. The previous government set about fixing that failure of government with this modest dam proposal, Emu Swamp, just 24 gigalitres small. Now your government is axing this project. What are the growing number of residents in the area going to drink?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Well, as I've already explained, Senator Roberts, unfortunately for the good people of the Southern Downs, the Emu Swamp Dam project and pipeline didn't have a proper feasibility case, didn't have a proper business case. What it did have was a promise from a coalition who had no intention of delivering it.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, your parallel interjections, as if you are answering the question, are disrespectful. I have called you to order over and over again. I am asking you to be silent. Minister, please continue.
So, as I say, Senator Roberts, there were problems with that project because all it had from the former coalition government was a hollow promise without proper business cases or feasibility cases, let alone actual funding. But at the same time, we are funding a range of water infrastructure projects, including in regional Queensland. The Paradise Dam, an extra $600 million. Senator McGrath used to have a bit to say about that until we committed $600 million more. The Cairns Water Security Project is getting more money. In Darwin, it's getting more money for water supply, as are many other communities as well. So we are making responsible decisions about funding water infrastructure which actually can be delivered, which has business cases attached to it, not just making promises based on colour-coded spreadsheets.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Minister Watt. In light of the recent protests concerning the conflict in Gaza and the disturbing effects felt in our communities, there is a growing concern about their impact on the social cohesion within Australian society. Would the Minister agree that these events are indeed affecting our society, and in what ways?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Van, and you do raise a very important issue in our country at the moment. And as I think Senator Wong, the Prime Minister and many others have already acknowledged, this is a deeply distressing time for many in Australia. That includes members of our Jewish community who lost loved ones in the abhorrent attacks by Hamas on October 7. It includes members of our Palestinian community who have lost loved ones in the conflict that has followed. And of course it also includes many others across our community who feel very deeply about this issue. The thing that the government has been saying over and over again throughout the last few weeks is that as Australians, whoever we are, whatever part of the community we come from, we must maintain respect for each other and for each other's humanity. All Australians, it doesn't matter what their religion, what their racial background, whoever they are, all Australians have a right to be safe and feel safe. And no one in this country should be fearful because of who they are or because of their faith. Everyone must be able to worship and to practice their faith without fear, intimidation or interference. There is no place for prejudice, no place for anti-Semitism and no place for Islamophobia in Australia. Australians are rightly distressed by the events that are unfolding in the Middle East, and I know many members of the government, many members of the opposition and probably yourself, Senator Van, have met with leaders of Australian Palestinian, Muslim and Jewish communities from all around the country in an attempt to try to bring people together. And we need to remember that, as political leaders, we do have a responsibility to unite the country in difficult moments like the one that we're going through at the moment, rather than inflame tensions by seeking political advantage, by backing in one side and not another, making selective comments. All of that does is actually drive our community apart rather than bring people together, which is exactly what we should be doing right now. So we are very concerned about the level of social cohesion, and we look forward to working with all senators who have an interest in this.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Given the potential implications of the protests on our social cohesion and community safety, could the Minister outline what measures the Department of Home Affairs is implementing to monitor and address any instances of foreign interference that might be triggering or exacerbating this disruption to our national unity?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Van. And certainly at both ministerial and departmental level, the government is acting very strongly on these matters. Within the Department of Home Affairs, of course, one of the sub-agencies is ASIO, who have a very primary role on this matter, and ASIO is well aware and well equipped to deal with the threat of foreign interference in our country. ASIO is monitoring for any foreign interference activity, particularly in light of recent events. The Counter Foreign Interference Task Force, which is jointly led by ASIO and the Australian Federal Police, works to identify, investigate and disrupt foreign interference. That task force brings together the AFP, ASIO, AUSTRAC, the Australian Signals Directorate, the AGO and ONI, are all working on how we can counter foreign interference which may be inflaming social tensions of the like of which you're describing. As you would understand, Senator Van, it wouldn't be appropriate to comment too much further on matters of national security, but in addition to this, the government is receiving regular security briefings about the situation and taking appropriate action.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Van, second supplementary.
Thank you. Does the minister agree that foreign interference, particularly through social media platforms, poses a significant threat to the fabric of Australian society and has the capacity to cause real and irrevocable damage to our communities?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Van. And yes, I would agree that foreign interference through social media has the types of effects that you're talking about. And that is one of the reasons why, at this very moment in time, the government is preparing legislation around misinformation. And I know there have been a number of speakers on the other side of the chamber. I can't remember whether you've commented on this, Senator Van, but I know there are many speakers on that side of the chamber who've queried the need or queried the government's motivation in relation to that misinformation legislation. But it's exactly to deal with the types of issues you're talking about, where we are seeing greater levels of foreign interference, including on social media, which is spreading factually baseless information, things that are just straight out wrong, and again inflaming social tensions. We regard espionage and foreign interference as Australia's principal security concern. More Australians are being targeted for espionage and foreign interference than at any time in Australia's history, and we need to work harder on this, and that's exactly why we're taking the types of actions I've been going through.
Thank you, Minister. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Minister Gallagher. I refer to the Prime Minister's announcement yesterday that the Australian government had decided, and I quote, to explore the safe and responsible use of generative artificial intelligence in the public service in partnership with Microsoft through the Digital Transformation Agency. The Prime Minister said this will be done through a 6-month trial of Microsoft 365 Copilot, which will run from January to June 2024, with Microsoft providing training, onboarding and implementation assistance with participating agencies. Minister, how many Australian tech companies were given the opportunity to tender for this pilot?
Thank you, Senator David Pocock. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Pocock for the question. The arrangement with Microsoft, the Copilot trial, was initiated through existing arrangements with Microsoft. And so that procurement arrangement was in place with the DTA and Microsoft already, so it's building on that existing arrangement. And we are very pleased with the opportunity to partner with this and to learn from it. It builds on the announcement that the Prime Minister that Microsoft made around an investment in this country, in their data centres and cloud-based products, which is an important investment, and we're really pleased about that as well. But this is a specific co-pilot or a specific pilot that will run for 6 months until June 2024 through the DTA, making it the first government entity in the world to deploy generative AI service. The trial aligns with the approach that the government has taken on AI in Government Task Force and the recommendation to the Future of Work Committee that all procurement involving generative AI capabilities will consult with the task force prior to any market approach to ensure a coordinated whole-of-government approach. Participating agencies will be expected to evaluate their experience of the product in order for the AI task force to assess its opportunities and to report back to government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator David Pocock, first supplement.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Are you aware that one of our local Canberra companies, Trellis Data, has the same capability and ability to do this? How does this square with the Labor government's election commitment that the Albanese government wants to ensure that more Australian businesses have the chance to benefit from contracts that deliver the goods and services the Commonwealth needs to support Australians?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister.
Thank you. Well, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for businesses in this area. The DTA has released a request for information, RFI, through AusTender to gain an understanding of generative artificial intelligence services and support in the market. I think there's going to be no shortage of opportunities for businesses, including local businesses. As Senator Pocock would know, the Future Made in Australia office has been leading the work for the government on the Buy Australian plan, which is the commitment that Senator Pocock cites in his question. We have already done a number of things to support procurement for small businesses, including updating the Commonwealth procurement rules, which targeted 20% of procurements by value be sourced from SMEs, doubling the previous target of 10%, and a range of other commitments through the procurement rules. Also,
thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. It's very concerning that if you invest $5 billion as a multinational, you then get a contract for AI when there are Australian companies that can do the exact same thing. The exposure draft legislation for the Defence Trade Controls Amendment would prohibit Australian companies from selling their AI tech to a wide range of countries. Is this restriction of Australian AI exports related to the government's new partnerships with Microsoft?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister.
No, but I don't believe so, but if I have anything I need to come back on that, I will. In relation to this is a pilot program for a short period of time that was able to be agreed to under an existing arrangement with Microsoft. So in that regard, there are opportunities for us to learn from this product. In addition, there are some opportunities around training, onboarding, implementation assistance for participating agencies. So we are looking to learn and partner on issues around generative AI, and I have no doubt that this co-pilot will be this pilot on Microsoft Copilot will be informative of further decisions the government takes in this regard. But I also repeat the fact that we are trying to get an understanding of what is out in the market as well, and there'll be a lot of opportunities in this area.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister and the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Wong. This month, millions of Australian households and small businesses are receiving further instalments of energy rebates as part of the Albanese government's energy price relief plan. Can the minister please tell us how many Australians will be benefiting from these rebates? And also, how is the energy price relief plan helping Australians with the cost of living?
Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you to Senator Grogan for her question and her interest not only in the issue of climate change and how we respond, but on how we also deliver real cost of living relief to Australians who we know are doing it tough. Our #1 priority is addressing inflation and cost of living pressures, and that includes through our energy price relief plan. First, we acted immediately to cap coal and gas prices. Secondly, we're partnering with states and territories to provide targeted bill relief. This started in July and is helping 5 million households, 5 million households and 1 million small business, all of which you opposed. You wanted 5 million households and 1 million small businesses, or small businesses, to actually not have energy price relief. For those eligible for rebates in many jurisdictions, rises will be completely offset with direct bill rebates. Now, we do know energy prices have spiked as a consequence of international events, including Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the global energy crisis which follows. That is why those on this side of the chamber and our government developed a considered plan to lessen the impacts on Australians. And in fact, the ABS has said that electricity prices would have increased nearly 20% without the government's intervention. That's what they actually wanted. That would have been what would have occurred under them. 20% higher. You know who voted against every single dollar? Every single dollar of relief to families and business, the coalition, the Liberal and National parties. The Liberal and National parties, if they had their way, Australians would be paying 20% more. So remember that when they have the nerve to talk about cost of living.
Before I call Senator Grogan, Senator McGrath, I called you many, many times. You were completely disorderly, and so were you, Senator Scarr. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President.
Minister Watt, that is unhelpful. Continue, Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. So 5 million households and 1 million businesses, that's very impressive. Thanks very much to the Acting Prime Minister for that great response. We also know that most social housing was built almost, over 20 years ago, before the introduction of minimum energy efficiency standards. Can you tell us how is the Albanese government investing to lock in lower power bills for social housing residents?
Minister Wong. Order.
Well, the Albanese government has an energy savings plan of $1.7 billion to help families and businesses across the country make upgrades and improvements to save on energy costs. And that includes $300 million to support upgrades to social housing, which, as the senator rightly points out, is often older and lacks energy efficiency. So those who have the least capacity to deal with price rises also have the least capacity to deal with energy efficiency, to enable energy efficiency. So these programs are to deal with that social challenge. It's estimated that upgrades to around 60,000 social housing properties will save up to a third of their energy consumption, and work is already underway in some states, including Victoria. This week, plans to upgrade energy efficiency in nearly half of the public housing stock here in the ACT were announced, and partnerships with states and territories, remaining states and territories, will be announced in the coming months.
Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
We continue to see some wild and impractical suggestions around energy policy, including those around nuclear energy. Can the minister explain to the Senate why the government is not pursuing this particular policy? And how the Albanese government is focused on responsible and realistic actions on lower power energy bills?
Senator Grogan, Senator Billig.
Having trouble hearing Senator Grogan's
yes, and you will order. Senator Ruston and Senator Cash. Senator Billig was on her feet with a legitimate request for silence. I was also calling the chamber to order. Minister Wong.
Let's go.
We had agreed to go to 301 as I allowed Senator's statements to read one of the children's statements. Hard marker? Thank you.
I'll be very brief. We know that those opposites' only policy when it comes to energy is nuclear. We know that the only company to have a small modular nuclear power plant approved in the United States has cancelled its project. And guess why? Rising costs, a 53% cost blowout. Yet again, we know those opposite ideology over evidence, always negative, always want to pick a fight, but never able to come up with any answers. Thank you.
Subject to order, the time for question time is now expired, and we'll go